Welcome back to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Strattner from Town of Fishkill PD in New York. Almost 30 years experience in law enforcement. He was on the scuba diving team. He worked the street crime unit and the SWAT team. And he is currently the director for the Regional Police Academy and he has been for the last 5 years. Welcome to the show, Chief Strattner. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit offline and you got me cracking up. I'm really excited for this conversation. I think it's going to be a good one. I did want to dive into a few things on your bio that I thought were really cool. And you don't really get this a lot. So scuba diving team.
Yeah.
That's so
I was
interesting.
super lucky. So as a rookie, you're usually not assigned to a specialty unit like that. I was literally walking down the hall in the station house, and a patrolman and a lieutenant who were both involved on the team were having a loud argument. Like an argument as a rookie I wanted nothing to do with. I was trying to melt into the wall, but I was so new, I actually didn't know another way to get out toward the parking lot where the cop cars were. So I had to go in between them, and the lieutenant grabbed me and said, "Hey, I remember from your resume when we went to hire you, you know how to scuba dive, right?" And I was saying like, "No, please don't even ask me any questions." And I just looked at the floor, and he turned to the patrolman and said, "That's tomorrow. You're on the boat. You're not working a day tour. You're working a 4 to 12. Report to the boat. You're going to work with the dive team." And he turned back to the patrolman and said, "That's how fast I can replace you. Like, you don't understand your place here." So I went out to my car and I cried for 8 hours because I thought that officer was going to murder me. Because I thought I had just scooped a senior guy and I was terrified. Showed up at the dock the next day, and the sergeant had gotten no heads up whatsoever that I was there. I was there in like polyester patrol uniform, not knowing what I'm supposed to do. He told me to sit in the bow of the boat and not touch anything. And I was like, I can do that, sir. Yes. And then that patrolman showed up later. He got on the boat with me. He looked at me and he's like, "You are the luckiest kid in the world, because the lieutenant assigned you by waving a magic wand. That's not how we do this. And I am now your mentor." And I was like, "Oh." And he said, "Make no mistake, that was a punishment to me. Like, I'm not interested in mentoring you, but I guess we're going to make the best of this." And I was off to the races. And he was an absolutely great guy. Like, so patient with me being stupid on lots and lots of things. Diving for the police department is very different than, diving in the Caribbean, especially when you're in New York and it's pitch black and you can't see anything. And he was fantastic. He was just a fantastic mentor for me. So that was like a good little bellwether for things that I needed in the future. And that was, maybe you don't get the assignment you want. Maybe you get stuck with the kid, but you can still be generous to the kids. Not the kid's fault. Right? It wasn't my fault that I was walking by and the lieutenant assigned me. So he was so generous with me. Jim Thomas, I will absolutely call out his name because he deserves it.
What a great story.
Yeah, I was so lucky.
I love that story. And there's a few things that I want to touch on, and I'm curious your opinion on this. But the first thing I'll say is that like description of diving in New York and it being pitch black. That was how diving certification was out here in Arizona. And I almost quit. It's terrifying when you can't see anything and you don't know if there's someone right next to you and you have people grabbing you and putting lights in your face for you to be able to communicate. And it's very scary. And I think that breathing and nervous system regulation is a part of what comes into that. So I'm sure that you were able to build those skills just by being thrown into that environment, which is very different because I've done both. Like you said, it's very different than being in open water where it's crystal clear and beautiful versus being in a stressful environment with a breathing mechanism underwater, pitch black. And so I think that that's very interesting. And I'm sure you learned skill sets that helped you later. But the other part of it is you said maybe you don't always get the assignment that you want. And the first thing that came into my head is maybe it's even better. Maybe that person, and to anyone who's listening, maybe you get something where you're like, man, I don't want to mentor this kid, or I don't want to do this, or that wasn't on my bingo card for this year, or ever. But can we enter into those situations with an open mind? Can we learn from them, and can we be the best at them? And it sounds like even though your mentor, maybe that was a punishment and it wasn't something he was interested in, he did a
Definitely.
great job. He helped to shape you as the leader that you are today, and the professional that you were throughout your career. And I'm sure that he learned things along the way too, being able to teach, being able to be compassionate, being able to turn, and maybe not to be so cliche, but like lemons into lemonade. And maybe it turns out better than you ever thought it would. And so I think having that open mind is so important.
Yeah, very much so. So I'll share with you the first trick he told me.
Mm-hmm.
And that was so you're at depth. We were not at depth yet at all. We were 20 feet maybe in fairly clear water. This may horrify some of your listeners. A lot of the diving we did was in New York City drinking water.
Okay.
Right. You might not want to know some of the things we took out of the water if you're opening up that tap, right?
Well, that's why the bagels are so good, right?
They are fantastic, thanks to the mafia. Um, right. So one of the things he said was, you're used to diving in nice environments, and this is a nice environment, but very soon you're going to dive in some dark, scary places. One of the ways you can take away your fear is to close your eyes. He said, it's going to be dark, which means you can't see anything. You're more comfortable in the dark if you close your eyes, because you're not expecting to see something because your eyes are closed, and you're going to do things by feel. And that's fine. That's good. And you won't be freaked out about the fact that you can kind of see something, or there's a little bit of a shadow. Your deepest fear is almost always the unknown. So if you close your eyes, you exert a level of control over what you're doing. And then the next thing he said was, and this was, a 2-part win for me. One thing is speak. So if you're speaking all the time underwater, you're not hyperventilating, you're not puffing, right? Because you can't speak if you're working so hard, you'll be out of breath. And speaking, he didn't get into the neuroscience of it, right? But speaking, the act of speaking activates the very frontal cortex of your brain and forces you to think. So if, as you are going underwater, no one's listening to you, like there's no one around. Your partner certainly can't hear you, but you're still speaking. And what you're saying is, I'm doing the grid search. I've discovered something that is large and soft. This feels to me like it might be plastic. If you say those things out loud, then you know what you know, and you know what you don't know for fact. And it keeps the front of your brain engaged, so it doesn't shut down and you don't end up just in some, deep amygdala response that would freak you out and then you shoot to the surface, right? We don't want that to happen. That can have lethal consequences. So he told me to speak, which was just brilliant advice.
Wow.
And I talked my way through, tons of dives. We had the advantage that our regulators were not in our mouths. We had full masks, kind of like what a firefighter would wear.
Yeah.
But there was brilliant advice. And then I realized down the line that same paradigm works across the board. If I'm sitting in my office today and I'm stressing over the budget for building a new building, which I was doing 20 minutes before this call started, I can talk my way through it, and then I'm not overwhelmed with the details, or then I really know what it is I have in front of me because I've said it out loud. And sometimes when you say things out loud, you realize how ridiculous they sound because you hear yourself and you're like, oh, that's a terrible idea. Why am I thinking that? That's a terrible plan.
Wow.
So excellent advice.
I love that.
Credit Jim Thomas, right?
I love that. And I appreciate tactical tools, like for you to say, hey, this specific thing helped me to stay present and to not panic or to overthink things that maybe don't even exist. Right. And we do that. Yeah. There was a statistic that was out there, and don't quote me on this exact number. But it was something to the effect of 80% of the things that we worry about never happen.
I think that's a quote from a Tom Petty song.
Is it?
Most of the things I worry about never happen anyway.
Yeah.
Totally true.
Yeah,
Totally.
and we start to like make up these narratives or make these things up in our mind, and we think that they're true. And if you are saying this is plastic, this like these are things I know to be true,
Yeah,
then it doesn't give your mind the opportunity to make things up, because it
that's
is
right.
so worried about that. So that is genius. I love
Yeah.
that.
So full disclosure, because people I know are probably going to be watching this and they are screaming right now, because I am definitely organically a catastrophist. Uh,
Okay.
so on the optimist to pessimist scale, I look at the pessimists and I don't like them very much because they are too close to the optimist in my world. It's not that the glass is half empty. The glass is probably very close to the edge of the table, likely to fall off, smash, after which someone will walk by, cut their foot, and bleed to death.
Mm,
That's
that's
who I
you.
am in my soul, which makes me very good if I am planning a dive operation or a SWAT operation or some other horribleness that might happen, right? Because I've probably thought through the fact that maybe I run out of air, or maybe my tank gets stolen by a sea monster or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. It can make me, fun for a short period of time in my house, and then my family is kind of like done with that a little.
Yeah.
But it is a good point. Yeah.
Well, I get that. And I would say I'm probably closer to you naturally as well. And I don't know if it's just my upbringing, my past experiences, that a lot of the things that could go wrong did go wrong. And
Yeah.
so,
Sure.
like, I learned that. Whereas my fiance, total opposite. He's
Yes.
like walking around like everything's going to be perfect,
Right.
doesn't think of the worst case scenario at all. And I think it's important to have a plan for things. But I also think, and we can even put this in the context of so many other things, but if it's predictable, it's preventable. So
Mhm.
if you can visualize those things happening, then you know how to prevent those things from happening, right? So
Right.
to the point of your story earlier, and I used to teach this. So I used to be a professional skydiver, and I taught military skydiving. So I would teach EOD how to do more advanced maneuvers in the sky. Like I was like their advanced training, and we did visualization all the time. It was
Right.
super effective for performance. And to use your example, if you're like to kind of rewind and you said, okay, the end result of that glass, falling and breaking, and then someone cut their foot and then they bled to death. Okay, so how do we rewind? So if we know that that is something that could happen, is it
Right.
likely to happen? I don't know. Could it happen? Sure, right? But if it could happen, then what do we do? Maybe we move that glass so that it doesn't have the opportunity to fall, and then it doesn't have the opportunity to break. And then, and so if we know it's predictable, it can be preventable, and we can take those proactive steps to preventing things from happening, and being more prepared if things do happen. And so when I would teach visualization, there's two parts of it. One, you can visualize everything going wrong. And what do you do? How do you respond? And you have to visualize yourself responding in an effective way, right? Because if everything goes wrong, your parachute doesn't open, or there's a malfunction, or you have to cut away, or you're not landing on the site that you want to land. Now you're landing out in the middle of nowhere. How do you navigate? What do you do? How do you get back? Right.
Right.
So having like a game plan is really effective. But then how do we also visualize things going really well? And how do we visualize us doing things perfectly? And so I think that we have to have both. Super effective for performance, but I think we can even think about this in the context of wellness.
Yeah.
What's
So
the
one of
what's
the
the worst
things,
case scenario, and then how do we make sure that we prevent that from
yeah,
happening because it's
back off
predictable?
that.
Yeah.
So one of the things we do with police recruits, we spend a lot of time uh, on breathing drills.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a wife and daughters, and they all yoga breathe. We
Yep.
don't do that, of course. No, we tactical breathe, but it looks
Yeah.
remarkably the same. I'm just usually not wearing Lululemon pants when I'm doing
Yep.
it, but it's the same thing, right? And actually, I have a son who's on a basketball team with the equivalent of me for New York City Fire Department. And
Mm.
we actually have traded notes on the breathing drills that they do for FDNY that we also do here in the police department. But there's a little asterisk that goes with our breathing drill stuff. So we could spend a whole podcast on how breathing will change the pH balance in your blood and open up the ability of the front of your brain to make good decisions and think things through. But if you always do that when it's bad, so if we only do breathing drills for recruits when we've practiced a gunfight or we are fighting the suspect or something's gone wrong, then we, in a different layer, we train them that the breathing drill equates to negative. Mm-hmm. And you can defeat the breathing drill that way. You will still change the pH balance, like chemistry is chemistry, but what its effect on your brain will be different. So we spend time with recruits telling them to remember the happiest moment of their life or some good stuff, or jump up and be like excitedly happy, scream happy birthday to the recruit whose birthday it is today. Everybody sing happy birthday, get your heart rate through the roof with excitement, and then breathe that down too. Mm-hmm. It's about balancing the highs and the lows so that we're not just trying to endlessly pull the lows up. So you can kind of truly even out and stay under control.
Yeah. I tell people when it comes to breathing, and it's twofold. So I have like a simple 3-step. And you said this earlier. I said, control the breath, control the mind, control actions, reactions, right? So like the more we can focus on our breathing, the more presence and concentration we'll have. And then the more control of our actions, our reactions. But to your point, it's almost like you're teaching stoicism in a little bit, right? It's like, how do we stay level as much as we can? How do we use those techniques on both ends, the peaks and the valleys, to come back to a baseline that can move us forward in a positive trajectory? Because the goal is not to get too high and not to get too low, right? We want to, of course, you want to celebrate wins, you want to be happy. And of course, there's going to be times where you're really sad and things are really hard, but how do you manage that? And breathing is an effective way. So I love that you teach that.
Yeah. Big on breathing. It is sometimes comical. Like you'll see the recruits, someone will walk through who's maybe a little older and not as progressively, on board with things like breathing drills. And they'll see the recruits in unusual positions around the gym, like kind of, on all fours doing breathing drills. And they'll be like, what is going on here? And I'm like, oh, I'm making them better than you ever were. Like, that's our plan here. So good luck. And if you'd like to jump in, go right ahead. We can help you with a little standing posture and some of that stuff. So
yeah, I want to talk about this. So you've been involved with the Academy for a long time. I know you shared with me that it was something that was very fulfilling for you to work with the next generation and to mentor. And that was one of the kind of parallels I drew to what you said in the beginning, that you had a great mentor. And so my thought is, because you had that great experience, now you have the opportunity to pay it forward and to also be a great mentor. But can you talk a little bit about the work that you do with the younger officers, the recruits? And I know, to your point of what you said earlier, wellness is something that you guys are really integrating early. And so can you talk a little bit about that and why that's so important for you guys?
Sure. So recruit school is super fulfilling. 30 years, SWAT is fun. It looks cool. It's not nearly as cool as anybody thinks it is. It's very not like TV, but it's still pretty awesome to do that stuff. And scuba is fun and street crime is fun. Like, they're all good things. But at the end of the day, you only affect that little slice of the world. And if you get involved with recruit school, all training is good. We have 5 divisions, but the recruit division, where you take a kid who worked in GameStop 6 months ago, and then you go from nothing to awesome. You've got 6 months to get it done. That was fantastic. My basic school coordinator now, unbelievably high-end guy. He was the sergeant in NYPD's emergency service unit. He was in truck 4 in the Bronx. He was the sergeant on that truck. Like, it does not get any cooler than that. And he will often say to me, there's nothing as satisfying as this. Like, it is so personally satisfying to take these kids and just watch them blossom. Again, absolute credit to Jim Thomas and a million other people who were patient with me when I was not the best rookie, not the best diver for sure. I don't think I was ever the best diver. I think I was adequate by the time I left the team. But yeah, so I look at some of the things that maybe didn't happen so well for me when I was little meaning, 20. And we realize now how important some of that wellness is. Some of those interactions are. So our plan New York State specifies a certain amount of hours of curriculum for recruits to get on wellness training, and it's very good. It's 16 hours, so it's a total of 2 full days. The academies are allowed to break it up how they want. We sat down and talked about it with a wide variety of people. So we include actual mental health workers, social workers in our crew of people who are going to be involved in this training. And we asked them what the best way to do it was. And their suggestion, which we got on board with, was give them an intro in the first couple of weeks. Because it's really hard, right? The first couple of weeks of the police academy, everybody's yelling at you. You can't do anything right. It's just negative in a lot of ways. You're trying to just tie your shoelaces the right way, and please don't call on me. And it's really hard. So let's give them a little bit of respite where it's not somebody in a uniform. It's someone who's going to come in and say, hey, I did this job, but I'm a little bit more chill. And let's remember that nothing is worth killing yourself over, right? They give a little bit of stats on, about 50 cops died by gunfire at the hands of bad guys last year. Like more than 350 died at our own hands. Like, let's not do that. Mm-hmm. If it gets bad, no, you can't tell the drill instructor that you don't want to do any more push-ups unless you'd like to leave. Like, that's not an option for you. But there are things available. So we do that in that first couple weeks, and then we give it some time to let it bake. And then we give them another 4 hours later on. And the thing that I am sort of most proud of is that on our family night, so moms and dads and brothers and cousins and whoever comes to the academy on a Friday night, and we put on this show. And our family night includes a recap of our wellness block for the families so that they understand what goes into keeping an officer well. And I kind of, I have a certain look. I get what I look like, right? So when I'm in front of the parents, I explain to them that they have homework, and their homework for the 3 months between family night and graduation is to get okay with therapy, right? Like, get good with it. And I get it. You may not be good with it tonight, but you got 3 months to get over it. And I kind of knife hand them a little bit and say, in 3 months, it's not a maybe. It's not possibly that your officer is going to see something hard or have a terrible day. We know they are. Mm-hmm. And they need to know that my telling them and all our other staff here that things like therapy and the wellness programs are a good thing. And I cannot have you sabotage me, right? I can't have my recruit, who's now my police officer, go home and have mom scoff at the thought of therapy. Like, you need to be on board with this. And good news, you don't have to be on board today, right? You got 3 months to get over it, and then we'll get you there.
Wow.
But that is how we lean into that. And we save the last wellness block for just before they're about to get out of the academy to recap it with them, to say, hey, I know you forgot a lot of stuff that happened in the last 6 months, but you've had this a few times. We're sprinkling it along the way so that it will stick. And just as a recap, here's everything. And there's sort of these 8 pillars of, try and keep your spirituality. Don't spend too much money. Don't go buy a new car, rookie, right? You can't afford it. Stop drinking Starbucks coffee. Go drink gas station coffee like you're supposed to. Yeah. And, all those other little factors that go into it.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. And I think the question that came up in my head, and I love that you say that to the families. I've never heard anyone say that before. And, I've done a lot of work with academies and, pre-academy and academy. And, they're so excited and they're bright-eyed and they're bushy-tailed and they're so absorbent. They want to take all the information and they want to be the best. They want to perform really well.
Right.
And then they get into their agencies, and the agency can also sabotage or maybe influence some of that stuff too. You see them come in, and now there's peer pressure that happens. And my question for you is, how do you as a leader create a culture, or maybe what are those conversations that you have with your leadership team so that everyone's on the same page? So then when the recruits do come into the organization, they're supported through those things too. And it's not something that kind of, lives and dies at the academy.
Yeah, so that is hard. Right? It's hard in a lot of things. We teach recruits a better method for taking a resistant subject into custody. And then they learn the best new way. And then they go out into the street, and somebody who has 10 years on doesn't know that new way. And our recruits do a thing called head and hips, like where if you control the head and hips, you can control most of someone's body. Then you just focus on their hands and you're done, right? And you'll see these older school guys do it. So one of the things that we do here and I get it, we're lucky because we have a little bit of money. Every police officer in my county comes back to the academy for a week every year.
Okay.
And we have the opportunity to bake these things into them. So we give them 2 hours on defensive tactics, especially to the field training officers, to say, hey, listen, this is how we're going to do that. One of the blocks that we repeat every year is between 2 and 4 hours of wellness-focused things. And it's always a little bit different. We don't put on the same show every year for in-service, but every year it's just that kind of steady drumbeat. And what we found in doing that for at least 8 years of pounding the wellness thing into the troops is now those guys are all sergeants, right? The early middle management of the larger agencies are so on board that they're creating things in some of the departments. One of the departments very close to here has a wellness room that's stocked with like healthy food. So you're stuck on a double. It is what it is, kiddo. You're not going home, right? Like the world is collapsing and I need you to work, but you don't have to go to Wendy's. Like there's a room with a fridge with meals. Go grab a meal and eat something nutritionally balanced, with some good protein, no garbage in it. And we're going to do that. And we're going to make sure that you have access to those things. So even when I was pretty new, I think 5 years on, I went to a car wreck where a bunch of children were killed. It was terrible. It didn't particularly bother me. That particular incident didn't bother me. My union ordered, so the police department said, okay, you're going to go to at least 3 sessions of counseling after that. And I said, I don't need that. I'm fine. And my union, which was amazing, knife-handed me and said, absolutely not. You are going to that. And I said, oh, what? Because they're paying me overtime. Got it. I'm going to go. And they said, no, because someone's going to need it and no one's going to ask. So you are going. Every cop that was on that job is going. And we do it every time, always. So that way no one has that feeling of like, I got to put my hand up. I don't feel so good. Absolutely not. Go. You can go and sit there and chew gum for all 3 sessions if you want to. We don't care what you do. The union guy said on the side, like, we recommend that you don't do that. You're awfully young and you probably don't know what's affecting you. But that order that didn't just come from the police administration, but also came from the union, very valuable, very valuable.
Thank you. I love that you said you give everyone the why, you train them as early as possible with the newest techniques that you possibly can, and then you make sure that everyone else in the organization is on the same page on a consistent basis. So everyone is learning similar things on a yearly basis. And then there are some non-negotiables when it comes to critical incidents or some of the resources. You're like, everyone's going to do it so that no one feels isolated.
Yeah. And I'm going to lie if I say we have 100% perfect compliance in all things always. There are definitely, a certain percentage of guys that are sitting in the back of the classroom with the arms folded, like, I don't really need this. Although I think the 5th time they've heard something similar from a different voice, from a different perspective, I do think that that it sinks in somehow. Takes a lot of different ways to train somebody. Sometimes those older guys, and some of them never quite get on board. And I understand that too.
I'll challenge and say, don't need it yet. I have, from my experience, and this is just my experience, everyone else has different experiences, but it's the people who sit in the back with their arms crossed that everyone is like, that guy or girl will never, ever, ever, ever. They're usually the ones that need it the most. And I find that they do eventually come around. Maybe not today. Maybe it's not a year from now, but I had an experience, and it's interesting how we sometimes can check our like limited belief systems with things, right? And so I used to work with Phoenix PD, and we did a briefing where we walked in. It was a wellness briefing, and they had, usually when I do briefings, like leadership will leave, or like they'll just be like, yeah, like you're good. Like, you have control of the class for the hour or whatever it looks like. In this particular one, they're like, we're going to stick around because there's one guy in the back that's going to have his arms crossed and we think he might be a problem. Like there's times where like he might be a problem. I was like, okay, sure. And we did the whole thing. At the end of the class, that guy is walking up to me and he's excited. He's asking me questions. He's asking me how he signs up, how he registers. Everyone was shocked because they were like, this guy never ever. Maybe never ever in the past, but today's the day, And
Right.
so I always ask people, because I think one of the conversations I have all the time is, well, we don't know if people are going to use it. We don't know if people are going to buy in, and therefore we don't know if we want to do it or if it's worth investing our time or our limited, funding to do these things, because we
Right.
don't think that people are going to do it. And I think the question is more so, is the pursuit of helping the people within the organization worthwhile? Is the pursuit of helping one person that will then evolve to 2, then to 10, then to 20, is that worth the proactive effort? And I think everyone collectively would always say yes. Obviously, there's challenges when it comes to budget and things like that. But I would just challenge everyone to, just because there's those people in the back with their arms crossed that you think will never, ever, doesn't necessarily mean that they won't in a year or 2 years. And the pursuit of putting out the information and putting out the resources and making sure that they have a soft landing if and when they need it is
Right.
worthwhile.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. So when you're doing the math, just ask yourself how much overtime you're going to pay for a line of duty funeral.
Mm.
That's going to be an expensive day, right? It is. They're enormous, enormous events. So if you would like to prevent that cost, you can invest that money up front in your officer's wellness, and maybe that won't happen then, right? That is a math problem that you can do. One of the things we found when we were rolling out some of this training is I'm going to use some New York terms. We were talking about being from New York before. So we grabbed a couple salty hair bags. So I don't know if that's a term you use in Phoenix, but I'm guessing you can imagine what that officer looks like, right? So we got a couple of those guys on board and we isolated. We totally were, CIA level abductions that we dragged into a dark room and practically waterboarded them to get on board with this plan. And they did, thankfully. And then once we put salty hair bags in front of the class saying, hey, listen, man, you need to do some of this stuff, it got rid of some of the barriers because they're like, well, if that guy's doing it, if he's okay with it, then it really must be okay. We got some of like the senior SWAT guys who are like, big monsters who just break things all day long. We got like one of those guys involved in it. Once we got him involved, then everybody wants to be him.
Right.
So then that was okay. And you pair him with a couple dudes who are just like, the amount of cigarette ash on their uniform every day is just unbelievable. And they're talking about wellness, home run, right? It got all those younger guys on board.
Wow. What a smart strategy. I've never heard that before. I have heard about the SWAT guy, for sure, getting them to be the canary or, the one that's championing, but I've never heard of getting like the 1 or 2 people in the organization that would never, ever getting them to buy in. And then that creates more buy-in for the rest of the organization. That's really smart. I like that.
We used a guy for procedural justice blocks, which are like, you don't have to be mean to people when you're summoning them. Like you can preserve their dignity. We used one of those salty hair bags for that also. And people would see the name on the roster, like, well, who's teaching that next day of in-service? And they were like, Fred Smith, are you kidding me? Like, what is he going to teach us about that? Everything. And you're going to pay attention because you can't believe that he's the guy in the front of the room. Like everyone wanted to show up to that, go to the show with popcorn. They wanted to see it. What is he going to say? And if he's a believer, then we have to be.
Yeah. Wow. That is so
Super
smart. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm going to totally do what executives do. I'm going to pretend that was my idea and claim all the credit, even though it was the in-service coordinator who did that at the time. Interesting. That in-service coordinator is now my basic school guy. It was
awesome.
Totally his idea. He's a super smart dude. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, naturally, I think all the credit always goes to, whoever's at the top of an organization. But I love that you've throughout this whole podcast given credit where credit's due. So I
Yeah.
appreciate that. I feel like we could talk forever, but we are running close on time. So
Yeah.
I do want to ask my final question. And I know
Sure.
that, mentoring and helping that next generation is something you're really passionate about. But for the younger generation, the younger men and women who are coming into this career today, what words of wisdom would you share with them?
So, as important as the mentors are, speaking to the mentors, do your thing, man. Like, share what you have. To the younger officers, continue to be coachable, right? Like, if somebody's correcting you, it's not because they're attacking you. And it can feel so personal when you are in need of coaching. My very first warrant I did with the SWAT team, brand new, didn't know anything. And I put the handcuffs on a guy who killed a police officer. That should have been awesome. And when I got back to the station, the team shredded me because I made a ton of tactical mistakes between getting out of the truck and putting the handcuffs on that guy. I'll spare you all the mistakes, but there were plenty. To stay on that team, I had to be coachable. I had to listen to what they were saying and recognize that they weren't attacking me. They were trying to make me the best possible guy that I could be to support the team, because we only have so many guys and we have to be awesome. And we don't have room for someone who's going to sulk. So as hard as it is, if you're young, when you're getting corrected, remember that in his last season, Derek Jeter had a hitting coach and a fielding coach. And he never got mad at the coach. He paid the guy a lot of money to help him in his last season after being arguably one of the best baseball players in the history of the game. Mm-hmm. So if you want to be Derek Jeter, you got to be Derek Jeter, which means you got to be willing to be coachable.
Thank you. I love those words of wisdom. And I've always said the biggest flex is to be coachable, to be trainable, to be a forever learner. How do we have that mindset? And it is hard, but I think it takes a level of kind of setting your ego aside and wanting to be the best version of yourself, wanting to always improve and not accepting stagnation or complacency. And I think it's also important to have people in your corner who do care and to understand that the people on your team do care, and so I love those words of wisdom. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time for coming on here and sharing all of your advice and wisdom and all the things that you guys are doing in wellness. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. It's been great for me.
Of course.